the flag bearers of D2C, of the D2C sector in India for many years, well before D2C actually became the common household term that it is today. So welcome both of you to the panel today.
Thanks, Akshay, for having me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Akshay. Thanks for giving us this opportunity to partner with you on this awesome initiative.
Absolutely, pleasure is all ours. So I'll briefly start with some of the key highlights that we had from our D2C report. D2C today has been defined as a market size of about $12 billion. And based on the research done, we estimate it to go to about $60 billion by 2027 in the next 5 years. Within D2C, we've also been able to carve out what we call the D2C market, and which is the own channel market, and we'll delve a little bit into more detail into what D2C actually means over the next 1 hour that we are together. And that market size is expected to grow from about 5 billion to about 22 billion. And it's a phenomenal growth, even though e-commerce in India is also increasing at a rapid pace. Direct to consumer commerce is actually increasing at a far higher pace, and people are now buying directly from brands much more than they have ever in the past. It's a trend that we've seen in the Western markets for many years, but the pandemic has really accelerated the adoption of direct commerce in India. And today, I'll start off the conversation with you, Mohit. Can you explain to our audience a little bit about how we've actually defined the D2C market, which we say is 12 billion, growing to about 60 billion in 5 years? It would be great to actually set context of what we mean.
Sure. So, see, let's say, couple of decades, right? We have seen HUL and PNGs of the world really growing, and we've been using products of some of these sort of offline house of brands, right? These are more conventional brands. They originated offline, right? They have built a very, let's say, strong distribution network across the country. But this distribution network has some, let's say, I would say, advantages and disadvantages, right? So it's actually multi-tier, it's actually sequential. Many intermediaries are involved. There are wholesalers, distributors, then retailers. That actually creates a lot of layers between the end consumer and the brand itself, right? So there are disadvantages. Obviously, when you let's say launch a product, it has to go through multiple players. The cost increases, the time to market increases, right? Whole inventory needs to be managed. Product innovation slows down, right? And you cater to mass market rather than to, let's say, niche market when you're working with as a conventional brand. However, what we have seen in, let's say, last 5 to 6 years, there are brands which are actually digital native. They have originated online. We are calling them as D2C. And why they are D2C is because they are acquiring customers online. That was their first point of attack. They are serving very niche audience, and they're selling through, let's say, marketplaces such as Amazon, Flipkart, and through their own brand and platform, through their own, let's say, website or apps, right? So these are, let's say, D2C. We are calling them as D2C brands, and they are reaching directly to the consumers with very little layers in between. They're able to charge better pricing, better margins, and their go-to-market speed is very fast. And they're also able to innovate much faster than the conventional brands, managing very little inventory with very little middlemen. These are what we're calling as D2C brands. Within D2C brands, as you mentioned, within, let's say, D2C or traditional brands, now even the traditional brands are going direct to consumers. They have set up their own stores. They have set up online stores. They are working with marketplaces. And that channel is known as direct online channel in our report, which is DOC. And it's applicable to both D2C brands and the traditional brands as well.
Sorry, I was just going on mute, but yeah, no, thanks for that. And, I guess one of the areas I'll delve a little bit deeper into it. I was actually very busy right now looking at Cubo's website. I only knew Cubo as a doorbell. I didn't realize that there are so many other things. And I'm almost tempted to order the smart lock right now while on this webinar. I'm controlling myself. But, one of the things, Mohit, is what we've seen really, it's never been seen before, is that a lot of these brands are scaling to heights of almost 100 crore revenue in 3 to 5 years, right? And normally what used to take 5 to 7, maybe even 10 years to build a brand at that scale, it's happened very, very quickly. What do you think? What is it that makes D2C such an attractive opportunity that we're seeing that scale today?
Sure. So I would, let's say, categorize the drivers into, let's say, 3, 4 areas, right? One is an overall macroeconomic scenario which is there right now. Economy, while there will be a short-term risk to the economic growth, but over a long term, India continues to be a growth story. We are expecting 8 to 9% kind of a real GDP growth. Consumer spending is growing faster than the overall economic growth itself. It will constitute 60-70% of the GDP. A very big mega trend is that we will add 100 million households to the middle class in the next decade. So these households will consume more, they will spend more. Another important factor is what we see around ourselves is that more and more women are participating in the workforce. As a result, they need, they are buying more, especially the apparel, footwear, personal care brands, right? Grocery. These are the categories where they're spending more. So there is demand for new products or better quality products. Then another factor is that India still continues to be, let's say, younger population with a median age of, let's say, 31 years versus that of, let's say, China and US, which is around 40-42 years. So Gen Z or the millennial category of customers, they are experiencing newer brands. They want newer brands. I mean, beyond what the conventional brands have been, beyond what their parents or grandparents have used or consumed earlier. Then another important trend is that 40% of the, let's say, Indian population by the end of this decade will be living in urban areas. And if we just talk about macro picture, then you will see more and more, let's say, online buying. E-commerce will continue to, let's say, grow at, let's say, 25% odd CAGR. I think the third point is, or the second point is that the entry barriers for D2C brands have reduced significantly. There are a number of D2C enablers which are available. I mean, Shiprocket is a great example. It's a tech-enabled logistics management company, and it actually helps in basically managing the RTO, the COD process, the entire, let's say, managing the multiple courier partners. Then you have a number of website builders which are available out there, and payment gateways, marketing automation tools. And I think lastly, there is a lot of investor interest now in D2C brands. These brands have raised close to $2 billion in last few years, right? So all this is actually driving the growth of D2C industry itself.
Absolutely, Mohit, couldn't agree more. And again, thank you for this plug on Shiprocket. It's always nice when someone else does it and you don't do it yourself. But I completely agree. I think, you know, the emergence of a lot of enablers in the system, not just Shiprocket, but a whole host of them, whether it's Shopify, WooCommerce, the payment gateways. I think it's just made starting a brand that much easier in the last many years, because I know a lot of D2C founders who started out about a decade ago. You could pretty much have to build the entire operations network yourself. Building a website took sometimes 6 to 12 months. Today, you can go live in 4 to 6 weeks. Things have obviously become a lot easier to be able to go live a lot quickly. And again, Nikhil, welcome to the conversation. And again, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Obviously, Cubo has been one of the flag bearers of not just D2C, but also Make in India, and competing in a segment which has a lot of influx of many imported products. Would love to understand as to, you know, how you've grown Cubo, how you've created such a strong brand identity for yourself and diversified your product range. It would be great to learn a little bit more about the business and how you see it going forward.
Sure. Thanks, Mohit, and Akshay for having me here. Look, I think I'll just give you some more context on Cubo. We're still a very young company. Thanks for saying we built a great brand, but we're still in the part where we're getting people to know what we do, who we are. And maybe I'll take a minute just to tell you more, the audience more about that, and then get to your questions, right? So look, I think Cubo is a smart devices company, part of the Hero Group, which is, as you know, a very traditional business, motorcycles, and so on and so forth. You know, the thesis we started with a few years ago was that every product was getting smart, right? You know, look at a watch, more compute, more intelligence, connected to the internet, AI, suddenly it's something else. And that's a thesis we had, that every product, from a doorbell to a lock in the home, to a TV, to even our clothes, is going to be reimagined with technology, right? And that's a broad connected devices space we're in. And I think, as you said right now, Akshay, a call we made very early on, right or wrong, it has made our life very difficult, is we will not import and sell. A lot of the brands today, and it's a great business, right, are largely importing the technology, building a brand and selling. We said we will build our own technology stack, hardware, software, app, cloud, everything in India. So it's been very hard. It's a very, very intensive journey building products in India and creating these new categories which didn't exist today, before, like smart cameras, smart doorbells, smart locks, dash cameras, all these things, right? And I think so. It's to your question of how we've grown, and to you, Mohit, your point on D2C, right? We didn't think of ourselves as a D2C company, right? I think what we thought about was, now we've got these new innovative products in completely new categories which don't really exist today. Right? Video doorbell, as you said, is not really a category in India. So it wasn't there when we entered a year and a half ago. How do we explain it to our customers? Now, if you go to traditional channel, you end up building your business for the channel, for their margin structures, for their needs, for their complexities, and you sort of lose a touch with the consumer, right? So we want to go directly to the consumer, right, and sort of build the business and get quick feedback, a lot of experimentation. That's why we went D2C. And I think it's been a great experience, right? Being able to have directly converse with the consumer through your own channels, and as Mohit, you said, enough enablers, and we also use Shiprocket, by the way. It's just so much easier to do it in today's world. We go after a niche audience with your products, explain the story to them, quickly test ideas, get feedback, improve your products, right? But that's been the real learning for me on this D2C and why this has worked out so well for us. So I'll pause there and sort of, I'll add more in the conversation, but that was the first context for me.
No, absolutely, Nikhil. And I guess, again, like I said, I think you guys have a phenomenal product, and it's always hard to be a category leader, right? When you're trying to create a market segment, like you said, a video doorbell was not a need I knew I had, right? The same way many years ago when there was a company called Hive in the UK, which did the smart thermostat on the app, right? Which allowed you to control room temperatures. I never thought I needed it, but once you get it, you're like, how did I actually function before without it? And when I was looking at your website right now, I just realized you do smart locks as well. And for the longest time, I only heard of brands like Samsung who did it, or Yale, maybe the big hardware manufacturer. So I guess my next question is, whilst you're doing all of this in India, you have the challenge of developing your tech from scratch, building a world-class product and competing with large brands, which are with a global market have already built world-class products. How do you differentiate yourself with all the noise out there?
I think, look, the reality is a lot of consumer electronics and technology is a hard business when you get into hardware. There's global brands who build these products over years and huge marketing dollars. But the upside is, they're not really built for India. They're not built for Indian homes, Indian environments, 3 generations living together. I mean, all the video doorbell and camera AI you hear in the US, they solve for package detection. Amazon guy leaves the package outside the door. It doesn't happen in India, right? We have different problems. We have kids, babies with nannies at home, right? We have 3 generations of families using a smart door lock. And how does your grandfather to your child help use it, right? So we really solve for those use cases with our app, with our software, with our AI, right? And sort of build the products right for the market. To how do you get your message out there? I think that's why this whole D2C strategy of being direct to consumer, focusing on our core messaging, marketing, and letting the rest being handled by people like you or the payment gateways, not worrying about the infrastructure. There's enough enablers out there who build the infrastructure for you. We get to focus on getting a message out there to the consumer, right? So that's been the for us, build great products and then use digital channels to efficiently, with little capital, reach the right audience. And that's sort of what's worked for us.
Absolutely. I think, again, it's absolutely the right strategy. I think focusing on a good product, nothing is more important, right? Marketing can only get you so far. At the end of the day, it's the word of mouth, the referrals, and the repeat. I keep on saying e-commerce businesses are never built on acquisition. They're always built on repeat, right? And in a category like yours, hopefully you don't have to buy the same product over and over again. But once you trust a brand, you buy multiple products from the same brand, right?
And if I can add, and that's why I think the world's changed, right? If I was doing this 10 years ago, the internet was around, but digital marketing was still in infancy, right? There was no easy way to find a niche audience, go after it. That's where life is a lot easier now. You have to go after the early adopters in certain locations, all over the country. And it's not just tier 1 cities. 50% of our sales are tier 2, tier 3 cities. We just launched a dash cam 2 months ago, and we have people from everywhere, from Limadi, Gujarat to Badlapur and Maharashtra to Port Blair, who are buying a dash cam, right? how do you even reach them in a earlier context, right? And I think this now the both the marketing and the logistical infrastructure that exists, which lets us do this.
No, absolutely. Again, couldn't agree more with that. Mohit, I'll come back to the report now, and a part of the report which is very close to my heart. It's a topic you and I discussed many times over the last few months, which was the ease of market entry framework that we've developed. And the whole idea behind it being, when someone reads this report, there are different stakeholders, different audiences who will be reading this report. But let's say an entrepreneur reading this report will be looking at it and saying, okay, you know what? I'm looking to start something. I have an idea. I don't know how easy or hard it is for me to build a D2C brand or reach consumers directly. And that's how we came up with this ease of market entry framework, telling people whether it's supply chains, whether it's payment gateways, whether it is regulatory hurdles. There are brands such as Country Delight and Licious, which did everything the hard way. They had to create the entire supply chain because cold storage just wasn't there, the cold supply chain. So it would be great to understand a little bit more from you in detail as to how you've gone about developing this and some key highlights from this.
Sure. So yeah, so as part of as Akshay mentioned, right? So there is a framework called ease of market entry in this report. The framework is there so that any kind of budding entrepreneurs can actually look at this framework and the findings and say, I want to, let's say, expand and open a category or launch a product in a certain category. I want to create a new category. Which one should I go after, right? And why I should go after it, right? So as part of the framework, basically there are let's say 6 dimensions. The first is the market potential. How big is, let's say, the D2C or the DOC potential? How is it really growing, right? How much is actually really sold online as part of any category? Second is, let's say, the overall unit economics. Is it attractive enough or not? In terms of what are the average order value, or how much is the, let's say, gross margin in the category? Do people, let's say, order fairly frequently or not? Let's say in case of grocery and gourmet, I mean, you would like to, the ordering frequency is much higher versus, let's say, in case of, let's say, home decor or, let's say, household supplies, right? Then whole ease of manufacturing. Is it, are the raw materials which are needed to, let's say, manufacture the product, are they available in India or do they need to be imported? What is the extent of dependence on, let's say, the foreign supply chain? Then availability of the manufacturers itself. Let's say in case of, if you look at, let's say, personal care, or let's say if you look at, the grocery and gourmet, right? The manufacturers are there in India. The raw material to an extent are available in India. But let's say in case of electronics, a lot of dependence still exists on foreign manufacturers and foreign suppliers in terms of components. Then I think fourth is the whole supply chain itself. How easy it is to set up a supply chain. When I say supply chain, I'm talking about, let's say, the fragility of the goods involved itself, the shelf life. In case of, let's say, personal care, the RTOs are not, the returns are not there, product returns are not there. The shelf life is much longer, similar to, let's say, apparel and footwear, where the shelf life is longer, but there are high, let's say, RTOs. So, but in case of, if you look at, let's say, something like a Licious kind of a supply chain, it was built, or let's say Country Delight, right? It was built from bottom up, specifically for let's say products which have limited shelf life, right? They need cold storage and so on and so forth, right? So it's expensive from a setting up perspective. I think fifth is a very important one. Have we the category success itself? Have there been, let's say, large D2C brands which have been built out in that particular category? And what has been the investor interest? How much funding has some of these brands attracted in last 3 to 4 years? And lastly, and the most important one, are customers willing to try new brands or not? Do they, let's say, want to pay a premium for innovative products, for new products or not? Or they're still, let's say, stuck up on the conventional brand itself? So these were the, let's say, 6 broad levers or the dimensions of the framework, under which obviously we had many sub parameters. and basis which we evaluated, let's say, 7 categories. Out of those 7, let's say, categories, 3 really stood out for us. One is the apparel and footwear, the whole accessory apparel footwear market. Second is personal care, and third is the home decor market. So these 3 out of the 7, 8, 9, 10 categories we saw are the ones where, let's say, we have seen a lot of successes, and some of the unicorn D2C brands exist in these categories. A lot of investor interest has been there in these categories. They see very high average order values and good margins. And like I said, manufacturing, co-manufacturers are available in India. Raw materials are to an extent available in India. There is an opportunity to create a more niche positioning. Underlying market itself is pretty large. So if you look at the D2C market, apparel, footwear, personal care, and grocery and gourmet itself will constitute 75 to 80% of that market, and will continue to be the largest contributor. Out of these 3, 2 of them have a strong affinity for D2C. Even grocery gourmet has a strong potential, but I think it's more in the packaged goods market versus, let's say, the fresh fruits and vegetables or dairy kind of items, which are where entry for new players is difficult. That will be more, let's say, consolidate market where players like Licious, Fresh to Home, Tender Cuts will operate. There will be 2-3 players. Similarly, in case of dairy, it's Country Delight, and maybe a couple of other players will operate because they have built their product and their supply chain bottom up, which is very difficult for a new brand these days to build.
Absolutely, Mohit. And I'm just very insightful. I'm just gonna ask a quick follow-up. I think one of the categories where we've seen a lot of action when it comes to D2C is personal care and beauty, right? A lot of the large, almost unicorn brands and high revenue brands have really been created. And what is it that you think about this category that has led to such a strong influx of D2C brands in this particular category?
Right. So one thing which has been done, one thing which has not been done by conventional brands is let's say, innovate. There have not been, let's say, there were some products which have been selling. They have built large brands, but they were more mass products. But now what is happening is some of these D2C brands, for example, like Sugar Cosmetics, Mamaearth, Wow, so Plum, or let's say Oziva, they have actually identified, when they started, they identified a niche. They innovated on the product side. They had, let's say, very differentiated offering, let's say natural, toxin-free, or some hero ingredient was there in these products. That was one starting point for them. Second is, like I said earlier, they have been able to rather than positioning it, let's say, a sort of a cheaper alternative to existing products, they positioned them as a, let's say, a premium product versus the existing product because of their product qualities itself, because of the differentiation, while not pricing it very expensively, but maintaining a fine balance between affordability and let's say the premium, right? So they were targeting more of a, I would say, masstige or mass premium kind of a segment. So the margins have been fairly high. 70 to 80% margin is gross margins are witnessed in this category, right? Third is, again, like I mentioned earlier, there is no RTO, concept of RTO in this category. When you sell the product, it has to be delivered, and it has to reach the right customer, and there will be no returns. So that really saves the cost for them. I think fourth is what they've done well is the overall packaging, the experience, customer experience has been managed very well by these products. So that has really, let's say, helped them. And lastly, they have not only been dependent on marketplaces, they have built a very strong direct online channel for themselves, where they're interacting directly with the customers, taking their feedback, managing their ratings on the various platforms, right? Providing good customer support and engaging with the customers, leveraging, apart from performance marketing, they are also leveraging a number of these influencers, celebrities, to build a community around themselves.
I mean,
No, absolutely, Mohit. And I couldn't have asked a better segue to my next question to Nikhil is more about, marketplaces versus own channels and how you view that in your journey, because no one can argue that marketplaces actually play a great role in giving visibility to a product, given that they have millions of consumers and eyeballs on there. How have you approached this whole dilemma between how you focus on marketplaces versus own channel, when to actually start your own channel? Or initially, is it only focusing on marketplaces? What was your strategy, and what advice would you have for the people watching us today?
sure. And I think it's a very, very important question. I think I've learned this along the way. I wish I knew what I know now when we started. But I just want to add one thing to what Mohit said earlier, if that's okay, right?
Yeah.
I think, I was listening to you, Mohit. I think a great insight on what these young companies have done better. And you wonder, what are the big companies doing? They're also full of smart people. Why can't they figure it out? Better packaging, better positioning, more niche. I think the real challenge and hence the opportunity is they get held captive by their installed base. So installed base, their distribution channels, their couriers, their mass market, right? Then the opportunity really is to go niche, figure out a segment out, get the right product, because you have nothing. You have no channel, no trade margins, nobody fighting you to go experiment, right? And then build on that. I think that's what's really happening. And I always wonder, all the IIT, IIM guys sitting in Unilever, why don't they figure it out? Why did they take a Mama Earth or somebody else to do it, right? I think that's probably what it is. But back to your question, I think, the way I see this is obviously all channels are relevant. I think we've had great success with the marketplaces in Amazon, for example, where there was a large existing demand of products, right? And where we had a price competitive, but differentiated offering, right? Amazon or Flipkart is not a place you can go build, explain a very different product to a customer, right? The existing category of products, you have something similar, competitive, but slightly better. It's a great place to go sell that and tap into the existing demand, right? If you have a differentiated product, it doesn't exist, then you got to build your own channel. Then you got to have your own website, your own social, to be able to explain your story, to explain what you're for, what you stand for, right? And that's why I found social and digital to be a great way to get a story out there. So and we, like, for example, give cameras, which are fairly large category. It's all Amazon, Flipkart, just getting market share, right? If it's doorbells, locks, new things, it's largely our own channels, our own websites, or in fact, physical stores. So some of these products need experience. So you also have a partner with gadget stores to get a product out there. See, like a lock, which is a 20,000 purchase. People want to touch and feel to some extent. So it's sort of we're using every channel, but it's more about what product category and deciding appropriately.
No, absolutely. Completely agree. And I do believe that marketplaces add a lot of value to D2C brands in terms of initial scale, in terms of getting the visibility out there. And obviously your own channel is a huge factor in actually building a relationship with the customer, especially in a product like Cubo, where, it is an experiential product, and it's a product that probably doesn't have a very high repeat for the same product. It lasts for many years. But then, you trust a brand, so you buy multiple things from the brand. But one thing you said, which was really interesting, is the whole offline piece, right? Because when we talk about D2C, a lot of people, I meet in real life, they think D2C is a new concept, right? It's something that's just started in the last 3-4 years, because the term never really existed per se. And I keep on telling them that, no, you know what, I've known about D2C for about 20 years, because it's the time when people used to sell in department stores. And when brands like Nike and Reebok said, you know what, we want to start our own stores and don't only want to sell through multi-brand stores. That was the first coming of age of D2C, right? And primarily it was why does Apple want to sell its products through its own store? Because it's the experience, it's explaining the product, it's creating that, feeling of being part of a community. And when you think about online and offline, and a lot of people today think of D2C as only like, your own .com or your own app. How do you think about the future of Cubo and in this new world of omnichannel, which is becoming increasingly important?
I think the world is omnichannel. It's also a very difficult tightrope to balance, because the different channels have very different priorities and interests, and often they compete, right? So it's one of the toughest things for me to solve for is how do you build this omni-channel thing, right? Because we're not at a scale today where I can have my own Cubo Apple store. We still have to work with existing retailers who work with a very different margin structure and mindset than your D2C or a marketplace, right? So I think there's a place for everything. It's really figuring out how it works for you. For us, we are very clear. We will, as you rightly said, start with marketplaces. That's where the initial volume was. As very quickly we pivoted towards building our own D2C, because that's how you understand the consumer, engage with them, cross-sell, upsell. But as we go deeper, and as you get into more higher ISP products, right, the touch and feel also becomes equally important. So I think, and for some products like locks, there's a massive channel which exists today. Why not tap into it, right? So we are clearly going, working with all kinds of home improvement stores, gadget stores, and eventually that, and you know, the chromas or alliances, and have our own model. Ideal is to have a store in these places. Again, where we kind of control the experience. We don't have our own Apple store, but we have a store in store where we have our own guy, our own set of products, our own promoter explaining everything. But that is the future. We have to have, I would love to be, 60% digital, 40% offline. And this is including marketplaces and directly.
No, absolutely. And I think offline is very much going to be a very integral channel for many D2C brands, especially as they scale. Whether it's a commoditized product, whether it's a product which is very experiential like Cubo, I think having offline distribution and having people learn about the product, see the product is going to be very, very critical. Mohit, we've spoken a lot about the opportunities, right, for D2C brands, and it's obviously very exciting, and it's been a huge factor why Shiprocket has been able to scale in the last many years. It's the industry. But what are some of the challenges that you see ahead for the D2C sector going forward? What do you think is entrepreneurs in building D2C brands need to be careful of today?
Sure. So I think the biggest, if you look at from a current standpoint, right? Any D2C brand would be, let's say, a company in itself or let's say a small platform, right? So they will be competing for talent in this age and time with some of the established brands out there, established companies. So hiring your first employee, hiring your first 10 employees will be challenging, because you need to not only build brand for the customers, you need to build a brand for your employees as well to attract the right set of talent, right? So that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges we heard when we spoke to so many D2C founders. We have been interacting a lot with them, right? I think second is as D2C becomes important now, it is being noticed by some of the conventional, let's say, brands, and let's say the offline house of brands like Unilever's, ITCs, Marico's of the world, right? So they will themselves jump into this, right? They've already started setting up their own D2C channel. They are selling through marketplaces, and they're also looking to, let's say, acquire some of these. They've already acquired or looking to acquire some of these brands. So while acquisition is a good opportunity for some of the D2C founders to get an exit, but if, let's say, the conventional brands fight back with the existing ones, that will be let's say, a big challenge for them, right? Obviously, as Nikhil mentioned, it's easier said than done, because D2C, it's not just another channel, but it's actually a mindset, right? Where the traditional companies have to think very differently. What we hear from some of the established brands, it's very difficult to work in the existing framework. You need to set up a different company altogether, which is looking at D2C business very differently, right? And everything needs to be replicated while the talent pool exists, right? But they get, they are not able to operate in the current framework. There's number of approvals, number of processes which are really required to operate. Third is while these D2C brands are working on these marketplaces, but there is a certain cost attached to it. There is a certain amount of dependence which is there on these marketplaces. As a result, some of these D2C brands have built their own website or own app, and they're trying to engage customers through them. However, attracting, and while it's all good about getting traffic on your website, but it again comes at a cost. Organic sales comes at a cost, right? You have to spend X amount of dollars to attract traffic over there. Marketplaces generally are advertising, and people try different brands and ultimately choose one brand over the other, right? I think fourth one, if I can think of, is the whole fact that the opportunity is big. Not a lot of entrepreneurs will come into the space, but as a result, you will see a lot of these brands copying each other as well. So a lot of these Me Too brands will also come in. So you have to continuously innovate, customize, personalize according to the customer requirements. And I think the lastly on the or let's say the point is on the customer loyalty. While customers are trying newer products, the loyalty is more towards, I mean, brand loyalty is still lower than the product loyalty. People want to try, if there is a better product out there, people will switch. And I think I missed the last one, which is relevant, very relevant to the Shiprocket, is newer brands find difficult to work and serve customers across different parts of the country. It's a fairly large geography, diverse geography, tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural areas. So managing multiple courier partners, managing RTO, right? Managing a COD process is tough. As a result, players like Shiprocket and Picker come into the picture to help them manage this. But again, it's difficult, and especially for the smaller ones, because their bargaining power in front of the larger, let's say, courier partners or the larger e-commerce delivery firms is much lower.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I'll just add one thing for everyone who's watching right now. If you have any questions, please send it in the Q&A section, and we're going to reserve the last 10 minutes for Q&A. So please do send it, and we'll address them all at the end of this. Nikhil, I'm going to come back to you with the same question. When we think about Cubo and you think about the next 5 years, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges, and what are you doing to overcome them today?
I think they'll be very Cubo specific, right? If you think about the business for us, I think the biggest challenge for us is our smart products are still new categories, where I think we've got the early adopters to come on very quickly. It's really driving penetration in a meaningful way deeper into the market, right? Into India, and the real India is where the real challenge is going to be to drive scale, right? And I think this is unlike, something like say militias and meat and cosmetics. These categories aren't that big today. So this conversion from traditional products to smart products and just leading that wave and leading that charge, and building categories, which is a very expensive business. It's one of the biggest challenge for us, right? I think for us, given the infrastructure we build, things like building the product, building the tech, that's easy, relatively speaking. With partners like you and others, the logistics infrastructure product is easy. It's really driving, explaining the product and the market adoption, which is really the biggest challenge for us. I think it's very unique to us. Maybe not true for other categories that Mohit spoke about, but that's just the nature of our business and what we are in, right? So that's obviously from the business side. The other side is just people in this market. How do you get good people to come work with you, stay with you, engaged? There's a little bit of craziness going around, as we all know, right? And that's just building, the first layer team is there, but the second and third layer, continuously building it, enhancing it, retaining them, exciting them, is where I think the real battle is. Right? If you get better in that battle, you'll win the market battle also. I think that's the two fronts, the consumer and the people. That's what every business is about. The rest you figure out.
No, absolutely, and I think we're all facing that whole challenge around people, right? It's been a very, very weird market in the last 12 to 18 months. Hopefully, some rationality will come in, but again, engaging our teams, making sure that they're aware of a larger purpose that we're all serving really helps, keep some of the good talent. And I think with Cubo, like you're exactly right, market making is really hard. Getting people to try new products, getting people to realize that they need a product that they never even knew of before. It's never easy. Like I never knew I needed a smart lock, right? Until the fact that I got, weirdly of all, a pet in the house, and he has to be taken inside and outside for a walk every 3 hours. And there are only that many keys I want to be sending around to my entire house. So it's just easier to have, limited people know a code who can go in and take the pet out whenever I'm not at home. And that's how smart locks is something I've been looking at actively for the last 15 days. And I actually never knew Cubo. I know Cubo has doorbells. And what do you do, Nikhil, is my question to you. This long-winded question is, when you have a product that has just become so synonymous with your brand, and as you expand into other categories, what is it that you do to be able to make sure that people understand your brand extensions, your new products equally better, because sometimes you can be a victim of your own success, right?
I think I'm glad you said that. If you look at our product portfolio, 90% of what is sold today is cameras. So I'm glad you think we're a brand. So it's the second product. So I think that's sort of the reality of what happens is in this very niche direct-to-consumer market, right? Because there is no mass advertising, you get known as the product the consumer uses. And I mean it with all respect, right? I'm guessing you use the doorbell, and that's why you think of us as a doorbell.
Exactly.
Somebody uses the camera, uses the think of the camera company, right? So I think as you write, and I think that's where this whole ability for us, the real thing is there's two parts. One is new customers, and I'll come back to that to your original point. Second is you've got 150,000 customers today, we're adding 15,000 a month. It's still small numbers, but it's adding up quickly. How do you engage them? How do you explain the product, get them to get delight from the product, get more value from the product on a daily basis, right? Then be able to say, look, you have a doorbell. Now a lock would be even better on the same app, right? You can see the guy and then open the lock from wherever you are. So I think for us, it's telling this integrated story to our existing consumers, acquiring guys, and then engaging them through product delight, product experience. And what we're doing is we have a full team right now saying our products are not static. You buy a doorbell, we will be adding features every 3 months free, right? We will add, for example, a monthly who came to your door feature, right? In Diwali, we'll add a new filter, right? So things like that to kind of keep engaging the customer and then cross-sell, right? But I think that's still for your community. The other question is how do you get more people to adopt you, right? To understand your wider range. And I think the one thing I've learned there, and is, of course, smart products have huge adoption in the US. 30% houses have doorbells, locks, all that. And you'll say, have people saying people in India don't spend money. I mean, that's true. We spend money. We want value, which is in our terms, right? So it's really about explaining to people how a smart lock helps you, right? In my house, for example, the biggest surprise to me was my dad, who's 77 and anti-technology. He loves smart lock the most. Because chabi nahi uthani padti, right? So just explaining that chabi nahi uthani padti aapko is what you have to do in India to get it, to the right mark, the right message, the right audience. And that's where we are, again, direct to consumer, targeted messaging really helps. And we're hoping to scale that.
Absolutely. Again, Nikhil, thank you so much. Mohit, I'm going to give you the last couple of minutes to end this, and would love if you could just share some of the key insights or some of the advice you would have. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are watching us today, and hopefully many of them are looking to build D2C brands going forward. What are we've discussed some of the challenges, but what are the biggest opportunities you see, Mohit? And we'll go on to Q&A after that.
Sure. So, see, in terms of opportunity, see, overall, D2C landscape is very large, right? There are number of categories where new brands can be launched. It could be, doesn't need to be, you don't need to be a category creator everywhere. You can be you can be there in the existing set of categories, have a very differentiated or a niche kind of proposition. So that's one. Second is, if you want, you can actually, within a category, there are many subcategories, and it's not just about having a very innovative or a differentiated product. It's about launching a product at the right price, right? So that's the other point. I think third is on the fact that while a lot of the D2C founders and D2C business have been built basis performance marketing, there is merit in thinking about brand to begin with itself, right? There has to be some kind of engagement which has to begin from the very beginning. It has to be slightly more a brand which, like you spoke of, let's say, like Nikhil's brand, right? Cubo. So people are associating it with different products. But Nikhil has the luxury of launching and has been launching multiple products under Cubo itself, right? So your branding, your name, and what you stand for should not be limited to just, let's say, a small category or subcategory or some product itself. It should be more open, and you should be able to launch more, let's say, products under the same brand name. Other aspect is the distribution mix, which you spoke of, right? Whether it's whether it has to be, what should be the ideal mix for the product category you're operating in. There are opportunities like Q-commerce, which exists, especially for, let's say, gourmet, fresh, even, let's say, there are, and what we have observed is even in apparel and footwear, people want same day or next day delivery. They want to try and then try multiple products. They don't like to wait for, let's say, 5 or 6 days, right? So thinking about the entire distribution mix itself, then I think it's about a very important aspect is around the assortment, right? How many SKUs do you want to keep? Because that impacts your inventory, that impacts your delivery timelines, right? How do you think about it? And I think one last point is in the current situation, right? Thinking about overall path to profitability, unit economics, how do you manage your costs well? And where do you play? How do you play, right? How you manage your repeat rate, the customer retention, the overall ratings, right? So that is another important aspect.
And you said Mohit will have a last word, and maybe you can add one more word. I have one comment to add hearing him, right? The one advice I have for myself also, and as I've learned and for others, is you got to start with disruption. Right? I think this, you got to think of very disruptively, whether it's, and I have to start with the product. What is disruptive about your product? Is it a new category? Is it a niche within a category? Is it a new price value equation? If you crack that, and make sure that product is disruptive and gives something to the consumer that they don't get today, everything else will sort out, right? But if you got that wrong, you can try everything else, nothing's going to work. So I think for all founders, and I'm sure it takes 2 or 3 turns to get that right. You don't get it right the first time, right? And our first product failed phenomenally, and I'm proud to say it, but we learned from it, right? So it's really getting that product value equation right is sort of the key, and then everything will fall into place. Without that, nothing is going to happen.
I couldn't agree with you more, both Mohit and Nikhil. I think creating value is really, really important, right? You have to be able to create value, whether it's from a product perception, whether it's from an actual need, whether it's from a different, it's by creating a need that people don't actually know, which is market making. I think creating value is important because you can't capture value if you're not creating it, right? Trying to capture value without value creation, I always say, it's a sure recipe for disaster. We'll take the last, we have about 8 minutes left, and I want to respect everyone's time. So we're going to take some questions now. I'm going to punt some of these questions over to you, Mohit and Nikhil, as we go along. I'll take the first one, which is about shipping. So Ajay has asked a question that for a D2C brand who deals with fragile products, the major challenge they face is breakage. How to make the delivery partner handle a package with care? I think, Ajay, the biggest step that any brand can take to do this is to make sure that their own packaging is right. Because see, at the end of the day, the supply chains and the logistics supply chains are such that whilst 95, 97% of the packages are handled in the proper manner, you can't really control every stage of the supply chain, right? So whether it's that one person in a warehouse who is tossing bags around, or it's the last mile delivery partner on a bike or in a van who didn't handle the proper package correctly, it's very hard to be able to control every element of the supply chain. And I'm not making an excuse, it's just the reality of what it is. And delivery companies obviously offer insurance and compensation in case they have damaged a product in transit. But at the end of the day, that is little compensation for someone, a D2C brand founder, because you've lost a customer. It's not just about the product or the money. It's the fact that there's an unhappy customer who didn't get the product or got a broken product. So the best way to be able to do this is to actually make sure that your packaging is such that you take care of most of the circumstances that might arise in the supply chain. If it's a fragile product, make sure it's boxed in a hard box, make sure there's bubble wrap around it. If you can put a cutout where the product is actually kept firmly and it doesn't move around. And yes, does it increase cost to your entire procurement? It does. But I think if you having a well-packaged product also creates a lot of consumer value. It creates a great customer experience. So sometimes you're able to actually charge for that additional packaging. I think the best way to be able to solve for this is by taking the precautions ourselves. And of course, whenever something untoward happens to the package, there are people like Shiprocket who will make sure that you are compensated for at least the damage, if not for the, unfortunately, not for the loss of your customer. So that would be my suggestion there. We have a question from Kabir, and I'm going to post this to you, Nikhil. He's asking, what are some key channels and frameworks for customer retention? I see this as an issue a lot of D2C brands face.
Sure. I think retention, I think for us, I'll answer in my context, right? Retention is about making sure we have a product which stays with you. It's not something you can give and it's over, right? So it's about making sure the customer gets the most value from the product experience. And I think there's nothing else to it. If they like the product, they use it, they enjoy it, they get value from it, they'll come back. Of course, you keep in touch with them, keep aware with them, email marketing, social media engagement, in-app alerts. You can do all that, right? And you should do all that, but it's got to start with it. You have to be happy with the product. And if you make sure that experience of them consuming and using the product is great, all the problems solved, you're giving them the right intervention, the right time. So for example, when somebody buys a product now, we have 1 week, 7-day, 14-day, 30-day engagement interventions for different channels, WhatsApp, for customer service calls, whatever, to make sure the product experience is great, right? And then after every 2 or 3 months, there's a reminder about, we exist, here's something new. I think just continuously engaging with the customer, making sure, starting with the experience of the existing product is great, and then keeping in touch with them is sort of the philosophy we follow.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Nikhil.
Maybe I'll add a couple of more points. And I think as Nikhil pointed out, we can, while D2C brand, we are talking of products. So it can't be just product itself. It's a combination of product and service itself, right? Pre-purchase and post-purchase, the experience has to be good for you to actually retain the customer. That's one angle. Second is a lot of these brands have actually built subscription programs itself, right, to ensure that the customers are actually serviced regularly and they don't end up buying something else, right? You can also have loyalty programs around your product and around your brand, which will also help you build a base of loyal customers. I think lastly, some of the brands like Boat or Noise, they have built communities, right? Boat heads or noisemakers, right? Where brands stands for something. It's not just about innovative product or pricing. It's about the brand has some identity attached to it. That way, customers will keep on buying, let's say, more and more products from your stable of products.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Mohit. I'm going to take one last question. I know there are a bunch of other questions. There's one question around a concern with Shiprocket. So then we'll get back to you regarding your concern there. We have your email. So my team will revert back to you immediately on that. I'm not dismissing your concern. I'm just taking one question right now in the interest of time. And I'm going to start with you again, Nikhil. There's a question from Ankit, which is, how do D2C brands get visibility on Amazon and other marketplaces when they ultimately have to pay on these platforms too? Will long tail brands be able to survive? We are already noticing a negative ROAS and downward trend in ad spends across channels. How helpful can vertical marketplaces be in such cases? I think there's multiple questions there. So we'll take the first one around, visibility on Amazon, advertising on Amazon. How have you approached it, and what advice would you have for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, look, this is something I wish I had known all these things before, but it surprised me how expensive it can be to sell on Amazon, right? I think it's especially for larger categories, competitive categories, a real fight for eyeballs on Amazon, and it's getting more and more expensive, especially around big sales and everything else, right? So I think you got to spend if you want to get visibility. I think what we've found is that cost can be as high as 60 to 70% of sales in the beginning. But as your reviews quickly stack up and you show they're high reviews. So the way to counter that is get your reviews to be 4.2 or 4.3 and above. I've seen massive, if we have one product with 4.1, one with 4.5, conversions can be drastically different. So ratings really, really matter. Getting a high number of ratings really matter. And there are a lot of ways you can get there quickly, correct? But the initial phase, to get the initial sales, you have to get the visibility. But then what we've seen is rating goes up and you start coming up the organic searches because of your rating, the annual sales, costs are dropping dramatically, right? So I think it's what you've got to get to the first 3 to 6 months of a product life cycle and have the capital to get that to the point where you are among the category leaders, and then it becomes more organic. Yes, but still remains expensive, but at least then your economics start making sense.
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And it goes back to the thing, have a good product, have good service, and hopefully that'll get your ratings up and be able to, reduce your ad spend because you'll get a lot more organic orders. Mohit, I'm going to post the second part of this question to you, right? Where he asks, how helpful can vertical marketplaces be? So when we talk about, for example, let's say beauty and personal care as an example, you have marketplaces like Amazon, Flipkart, which are the horizontals, and then you have people like Nykaa and Purple, which are the verticals. What would your suggestion be to brands as they decide or choose, or even if they're selling across all these marketplaces, what value can the verticals add versus the horizontals?
Yeah, so see, while obviously the horizontal marketplaces are there, but they started with more with if we see mobiles and electronics, and they continue to constitute a significant chunk of the let's say GMV of these marketplaces. And the vertical marketplaces actually help you break the clutter from other categories. When somebody's searching for a certain product, if you, let's say, get 1 lakh search results, it's always good to have, let's say, to be operating with, let's say, slightly more verticalized marketplace where the competition will be slightly lower. The customer base will be more focused. One is understanding what they actually need, right? Building the top of the funnel. So customers who are landing on, let's say, Nykaa or some other vertical marketplace know that they want to buy a beauty product. So the conversion rates ideally should be much higher. That has been driving the growth rate of some of the verticalized marketplace. There are some other examples also. There are now marketplaces which are now emerging where only D2C brands exist, right? So again, those are great places for, these are great marketplaces where D2C brands can operate, and the customer over there is more open to trying new brands rather than brands competing with the conventional brand. D2C brands competing with the conventional ones, right?
Absolutely. Given that we're at time, I just want to thank both Nikhil and Mohit for your time today. I think it was a really exciting session, and thank you for all the insights. I'm sure the people attending learned a lot. And again, my heartfelt gratitude to both of you.
Thanks, Akshay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nikhil.
Thanks.